not that compelling to me.
Yeah, it's been a pretty soggy story all year long.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Coming up, we've got your last chance trade. Steph is picking an energy play that's lagged the market so far this year. We're going to reveal her call straight ahead.
And later, we'll speak with the New York Times reporter who co-wrote that critical piece on Dennis Muhlenberg just one day before the Boeing CEO's departure. As we head to break, though, here's a check on bonds. Treasury yields kicking off the holiday week with small gains. The benchmark 10-year currently yielding around 1.93%. Closing bell, we'll be right back.
The Bond Report.
We can't make traffic move faster during rush hour, but we can help you catch up on the news with TuneIn. With live around-the-clock news from MSNBC.
In the UK, they're significantly worse. When the president gets up to the podium...
CNBC and Fox News Talk.
The Fox News poll sizing up the race for 2020 found that each of the 5 top Democrats...
You can use your stop and go for good by staying in touch with the world. Search news to hear what's happening now.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
As we play out the 2010s, TuneIn's looking back at the music trends that defined the decade.
Don't believe me, just watch.
The 2010s saw the rise of the viral hit when meme-ready tracks like Gangnam Style,
Oppan Gangnam Style,
The Harlem Shake,
Do the Harlem Shake,
What Does the Fox Say?
What Does the Fox Say?
And of course, Old Town Road snowballed from internet oddities to global phenomenons.
I got the horses in the bag. Horse stock is attacked.
Keep listening to TuneIn for more trends of the 2010s.
Spend Christmas Day listening to the NBA on TuneIn Premium. Featuring 5 big matchups on the holiday schedule. Unwrap the action starting at 12 Eastern when the Celtics take on the Raptors in Toronto, followed by the Bucks and the 76ers at 2:30. The holiday cheers continue with the Rockets and Warriors at 5 and the Clippers and Lakers at 8. And a showdown between the Pelicans and Nuggets at 10:30. 'Tis the season with the NBA on TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today.
Right now, instead of hearing this, you could be listening to the music that keeps you moving with TuneIn Premium. Find today's biggest songs and all of your favorites commercial-free. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Be better informed, be better prepared. The Better Network is on TuneIn. This is Brent Musburger. Search BETR and start hanging out with me and my guys in the desert weekday afternoons. The Better Network is now on TuneIn.
Is up fractionally with energy and industrials the best performing sectors. We're on record closing high watch for the 3 major indices, though. Here are the 3 things that are driving the action. The S&P 500 setting a new intraday high as the year-end rally rolls on. The Nasdaq hitting a fresh high as well and looking to extend its win streak to 9 days, which is the longest since 2017. And mixed data today as new home sales top estimates, but durable goods orders miss the mark.
Time now for a CNBC News update with Brian Sullivan. Hey, Brian.
Hey, Carl. Thank you very much. All right, here's what's happening at this hour. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer touring a farm in upstate New York. He repeated a Democratic request that the Senate impeachment trial of President Trump include witnesses.
A lot of my Republican colleagues have said, well, these are pretty serious charges, but I want to know if there's more evidence. So the 4 witnesses that we have asked for are actually eyewitness to what happened. And I don't know, they could give evidence that's exculpatory of the president. They could give evidence that's negative to the president.
Meantime, thousands rallying in Hong Kong against police action to freeze the money raised by a fundraising platform to support the city's anti-government protests. The rally organizer accusing authorities of acting arbitrarily without substantial evidence. And astronauts on board the International Space Station showing everybody on the ground how they celebrate Christmas in space. Apparently they do backflips, but they also get care packages filled with goodies and some traditional holiday treats. You know, Morgan and Carl, like the old dehydrated harvest hash and fruitcake. Just your typical holiday. That's the CNBC News update at this hour. I will send it back to you.
I don't know, sounds delicious. I know they had more holiday gifts on their way from that Boeing Starliner that never actually made it to the ISS, but it looks like they were equipped regardless.
Ouch.
So good to see.
Ouch.
All right, Brian Sullivan. Thank you. The numbers are in for Disney's The Rise of Skywalker. Julia Borston is at headquarters for the results. Julia.
Well, Morgan, Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker brought in $176 million at the domestic box office. That's the 12th biggest opening of all time. But that is at the lower end of expectations and below the prior two Star Wars, which grossed $220 million and nearly $250 million, respectively. This film's performance dragged down by some negative reviews, a 57% score on Rotten Tomatoes, and its audience response was a B-plus cinema score that is the lowest rating of the 5 films that Lucasfilm has released since Disney bought the company. But the real test, both for Star Wars and for the state of moviegoing, is what happens at the box office over the next week. We'll see if Star Wars draws repeat viewings and reaches beyond its core fan base, or if the combination of reviews and less positive word of mouth than prior Star Wars leads to a steep drop-off in the box office numbers. Now, this year, the box office is down about 5% year to date. Now, even with that decline, and with Skywalker not living up to recent Star Wars openings, Disney still dominates with about a third of box office market share. Carl?
That's an incredible stat. Julia, thanks so much. Despite Star Wars coming in at the low end of estimates, Disney, as Julia says, has notched 6 movies that took in more than $1 billion at the box office this year. Gil Luria is Director of Research at D.A. Davidson and joins us this morning. Talk more about this. Gil, good to talk to you.
Thank you for having me.
Obviously, their dominance is unquestioned. But at the margin, does it raise questions about the viability or the usefulness of Lucasfilm within the company?
It does. If you think about the other franchise they wrapped up this year with the Avengers, that finished at a high. Avengers Endgame ended as the top grossing movie, where Star Wars ended up more on a low with this movie. And so it raises a question about the value of this franchise as compared to the other franchise they bought for $4 million, which was Marvel and Avengers.
So now, look, they've already amortized the costs on Lucasfilm, right? Long ago.
That's right, but the expectations from Disney keep rising. Let's not forget that this record year is the year they're going to have to comp next year, and best way to have a tough year is to comp a good year. And if you think about even the Marvel movies that they have coming out next year, they're going to be comping Captain Marvel and Avengers Endgame with Black Widow and the Eternals. It's going to be a down year, and even though that's an expectations, this Star Wars movie maybe is the beginning of that off year that Disney may end up having next year.
Gil, the question I keep coming back to is how does Disney balance the box office versus the streaming service?
Well, that is the big question. Disney is a fantastic company that has the value of its content has transcended all the forms of distribution, but we are in the midst of a very important transition. That transition to direct-to-consumer may get people excited about Disney, but let's not forget the experience retailers and brand companies have had with the transition to direct-to-consumer. It's a lower margin business. And so Disney has to make this transition successfully. It has to make it profitably. And that's a big question over the next few years.
Steph, is this a transition that you buy into?
No, I've actually been trimming it. I mean, the stock is up 32% year to date, and I think it's all because of DTC, quite frankly. I don't think people really, I mean, the headlines of films, and they do have to do well, but I think that's a little bit less important, I should say. Everyone wants them to get OTT right and DTC and ESPN Plus right and all that, and that's what they need to do. I just think it's priced for perfection at this point, at this multiple, given the run that it's had.
Gil, how to think about Disney? I know you mentioned that the expectation is baked in for it to be a down year potentially next year, at least from a box office standpoint. But how does Disney, I guess, navigate the content landscape with all these other streaming services coming online as well?
Well, they've made a very important move to own the distribution. They own Disney Plus. They now own a majority of Hulu. They own ESPN Plus. So they've taken matters into their own hands. That doesn't make that business any more profitable. They're going to make more than all their money on the parks and the broadcast and lose money in the direct-to-consumer business. So owning it is good. It's strategically important. But in the short term, it means a pretty big drag on their profit.
All right, Gil Luria, thank you for joining us today. Shares of Disney are down 1.5% right now. All right, we've got 22 minutes before the bell. Here is where we stand right now with the major averages. The Dow is up about 0.4%. The S&P is up 0.1%, and the Nasdaq is up 0.3%. Any close higher is a new record close, so we are on watch for that. Up next, we've got your last chance trade. Steph is looking at one oil stock that's up only 2% this year. A bargain.
And then later, fantasy sports company DraftKings is on the road to becoming a public company. Details on that when Closing Bell comes back.
Christmas, a time for sharing gifts and laughter, and photos and videos. Make the most of it with a SIM-only deal packed with data from Tesco Mobile. Like a 10 gig SIM for just £13 a month. It's just one of the ways we're celebrating 100 years of great value. Go in store or search Tesco Mobile today. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Ends 29th of December. 12-month contract and unlocked 4G-enabled phone required. Terms apply. See tescomobile.com/terms.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slams it down.
Catch your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn. As we wave goodbye to the 2010s, TuneIn is remembering some of the decade's biggest news stories.
In 2011, the Arab Spring sparks anti-government protests across the Middle East and Northern Africa. In 2016, the United Kingdom votes to leave the European Union, forcing the ongoing Brexit crisis. And in 2019, Hong Kong erupts in 6 months of pro-democracy protest against mainland China.
Search news on TuneIn to be there when the next big story breaks.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
Like what you're listening to? Want to make getting back to it easier? Use the favorite button to keep track of the stations and podcasts you love on TuneIn. Just tap or click the heart icon to add it to your favorites. Then find all your go-to audio under the favorites tab. Pretty easy, right?
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. Listen and favorite ESPN Daily on TuneIn.
Welcome back. Take a look at the S&P sector heat map. Any close higher, as Morgan said before the break, would be a record, and 25 more points. You're looking at the best year for the S&P since 1997.
Wow, we have less than 19 minutes left here to go. Here's a check on the closing bell big board. On top, the three major averages, all on pace for a record close. In the middle, today's biggest Dow leaders, Boeing, 3M, and Apple. And on the bottom, today's Dow laggards, Disney, American Express, and Verizon.
All right, so about 18 minutes left in the session. Stephanie, let's talk about this last chance trade.
Okay, ConocoPhillips, so a laggard, up 2% as you mentioned, but it's yielding. It's a free cash flow yield right now at 9%. This company has great assets, high-quality integrated oil company, right? Their assets are in the Bakken, Eagle Ford, Alaska, Delaware Basin. This will lead to good, solid production growth next year and free cash flow growth, which is why I mentioned the yield before. They're going to generate $6.2 billion in free cash flow next year. What are they going to do with it? They're going to continue to buy back stock and raise the dividend. They just announced a new buyback program. They're buying back already 5% of their shares outstanding, and it's yielding 2%. It's a little flimsy, but I think there's room more to go there. So I like the valuation. I like that it's lagged. Great management team. So it's a bet on energy, though, for sure.
Where does crude need to be for this stock to outperform the way you see it?
50.
Okay.
So over the next 10 years, if you average $50 a barrel, they're going to generate $50 billion. So that's a lot. So I like the risk reward, to be honest with you.
And of course, one of the things you were mentioning is the fact that there's basically a stealth rally afoot with energy overall right now.
Yeah. I mean, it's really amazing. Looking at some of these oil services companies, I'm in Schlumberger, but I mean, look at these offshore drillers like Diamond Offshore and Transocean. They're up 11% today, and Apache's up 17%. So it's not going to take much, guys. That's the point. It's less than 5% of the S&P 500 in terms of its weighting. So that's kind of telling, too.
All right, ConocoPhillips, that's your last chance trade. This is the last commercial break we are going to take before the close. We'll take you inside the market zone next. And as we head to break, here are the biggest winners and losers in the S&P this year. Closing bell. We'll be right back.
This is Nancy.
I used to be a bit of a rubbish sleeper. I'd toss and turn all night. And somehow I could never find the comfy bit of the mattress. It was a proper nightmare. That's what brought me here. Testing mattresses in the Which Test Lab. We use a custom-made barrel rolling machine to simulate a decade's worth of use. And the mattresses that perform best are the only ones we recommend for your bedroom.
Which tests harder so you can buy smarter. Visit which.co.uk.
As we play out the 2010s, TuneIn's looking back at the music trends that defined the decade.
Don't believe me, just watch.
The 2010s saw the rise of the viral hit when meme-ready tracks like Gangnam Style,
Oppan Gangnam Style,
The Harlem Shake, What Does the Fox Say?
What does the fox say?
And of course, Old Town Road snowballed from internet oddities to global phenomenons.
I got the horses in the bag. Horse stock is a tag.
Keep listening to TuneIn for more trends of the 2010s.
Ho, ho, ho! Make my job easier this year with a subscription to TuneIn Premium, featuring the world's largest selection of music, news, podcasts, and sports. It's a gift they'll enjoy every day, all year long. Ho, ho, ho! Happy holidays! Search Premium to upgrade today.
Looks, catches on, goes in the end zone, touchdown underneath the crossbar.
NFL fans, hear every live game on TuneIn Premium. Tonight, TuneIn has your Monday night NFL football with the Green Bay Packers at the Minnesota Vikings. Kickoff at 8:15 p.m. Eastern.
Goes up, dart toward the end zone, caught, ball, touchdown with a touchdown to the left corner. Bucs take the lead.
At home or on the go, hear the home and away call of every NFL game this season on TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today.
Are you curious what others are listening to on TuneIn? Head to the trending section under Browse to see the most popular stations and podcasts among TuneIn listeners right now. Check it out. You might just discover something new for yourself.
From ESPN and the award-winning producers of The Sterling Affairs comes the latest season of 30 for 30 podcasts. 4 brand new stories of espionage.
He wanted this team to be the Barcelona of women's basketball.
Resilience.
I started to scream. I tried to get away.
Corruption.
It's the culture of win at all costs.
And rebirth.
How will we ever rebuild it?
30 for 30 Podcasts, Season 6. Listen in favorite 30 for 30 podcasts on TuneIn.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
minutes left in the trading day. We're now in the closing bell market zone. Commercial-free coverage of all the action going into the close.
Today we're joined by Stephanie Link from Nuveen and Tom Lee from Fundstrat Global Advisors. Let's kick things off with the big story of the day, though. A big C-suite shakeup at Boeing. CEO Dennis Muilenburg is out, and Phil LeBeau has the latest. Phil.
Morgan, the new CEO is Dave Calhoun. Dave Calhoun has been the executive chairman at Boeing on the board of directors for a couple of years now, has been on the board since 2009. On January 13th, he becomes president and CEO. When you look at his game plan, it really comes down to three things right now. And we're talking broad concepts here. First one, rebuild the FAA relationship. And to that end, one of his first calls today was to the head of the FAA, a reset for the 737 MAX. That doesn't mean scrapping all the work that's been done, but it does mean taking a fresh look at everything, and let's see how do we get this thing recertified again, finally repairing airline confidence in Boeing. And part of that is Calhoun, along with Stan Deal, the head of commercial airplanes, along with Greg Smith, the CFO, Tim Keating, who's in charge of government operations. Guess what they spent today doing? Calling key stakeholders, not just one or two, dozens, making it very clear to them that there is new leadership at Boeing and there is a new day beginning in terms of trying to get the MAX certified, recertified, and getting Boeing back on track. Guys, back to you.
Steph, I mean, it was just a couple of weeks ago that the conversation here on this desk was the worst seems to be behind for Boeing, and maybe the company's turning a corner, and then this happens.
Yeah, but this is a reset, and I think a much-needed reset, because I think Muilenburg lost a lot of credibility, not just with investors, but obviously with the FAA, right? So, and then that article that came out over the weekend, that was really damning too. So I think to the point that you can get, like, no news coming out in this company, like it being quiet. Remember a couple of years ago, it was Facebook. They were always in the news every single day, and as soon as things went quiet, that's when the stock actually could recover. And I think that's very much what's going to happen for 2020 at Boeing.
Yeah, Phil, whenever a stock rises on the exit of an executive, but in this case adds $3 billion to market cap, it does suggest that investors were ready to say goodbye.
Oh, I think investors were ready a while ago. And it was increasingly clear when you talked with people about Dennis Muilenburg, it was not a case of, well, boy, will he stick around and stay in this job? It was a question of when do they make a leadership change? And you and I discussed this, Carl. The question came up when he was on Capitol Hill. Is he going to be replaced? And at the time I said, look, that would add a level of uncertainty into what's going on with the MAX and getting it recertified. But it's clear, the last month, especially the damaged relationship between Boeing and the FAA, they needed to make a change.
Phil LeBeau and Boeing. Phil, thanks as always for coming in from vacation for a full day of work. New home sales, meantime, rising 1.3 in November. Let's get to Diana Olick for more on that. Hi, Diana.
Hi, Carl. Yeah, home shoppers in November signed slightly more contracts to buy newly built homes than in October, but October's numbers were revised down sharply. Still, sales were up 17% annually, and that annualized pace has now been over 700,000 for 5 of the past 6 months. The first stocks of the big builders did take a small hit on the news, but they're way up year to date regardless. Now, that may be because of the median price of a new home sold in November. It jumped 7% annually. More pricey homes selling, fewer cheaper homes selling, because builders are still not putting up enough entry-level homes to meet that demand. Back to you guys.
Diana Olick, thank you. Tom Lee, the fact that we've seen housing basically stabilize, even show some green shoots this year, how in jeopardy is that, given the fact that we're now starting to see these inventory shortfalls going into next year?
Well, I mean, it's a problem because, home buyers need stuff to buy, but it's a good problem to have. I mean, I think that it's really reflecting that tailwind. Millennials are entering their prime income year. It's a huge cohort. It's causing the number of 30, 50-year-olds to grow for the first time in more than 12 years. So it's a big tailwind. It's important to the economy because every new home being built is 4 full-time jobs, and obviously it's credit demand. So I think this is all pointing to a really good picture for the next few years.
Stephanie, how would you play housing right now, if you would?
Yeah, I've been selling D.R. Horton. Sounds like I'm selling a lot, doesn't it? Actually,
it does.
But sometimes you have to trim, right? If you make good money, I'm not perfect at market timing. So D.R. Horton, I love, but I have been taking profits. I've actually been putting that, though, into Home Depot, because Home Depot is still down 10% from its high from when they reported earnings, and I do think that this whole housing theme is going to continue. I think this is fabulous for the consumer, and the fact that median home prices are up mid-single digits also gives consumers confidence of what they own and what it's worth. And so I think all of that plays into a very good consumer, and so I think 2020 is another good year for the consumer.
All right, meanwhile, sports betting. sports betting company, I should say. DraftKings is on the road to becoming a public company. Julia Borson has more. Julia.
That's right, Morgan. DraftKings is merging with Diamond Eagle Acquisition Corp. It's a special purpose acquisition company that already trades on the NASDAQ. Now, this allows the fantasy sports and sports gambling company DraftKings to go public without a typical IPO. Shares of Diamond Eagle soaring today, up nearly 10%. Diamond Eagle will change its name to DraftKings and change its ticker symbol. The merger is expected to close in the first half of next year. The company will trade on the NASDAQ with an estimated market cap of over $3 billion. Guys, back over to you.
So, Tom Lee, if you think the consumer might be a place to focus or continue focusing, I should say, as an investor, does something like the first ever pure play publicly traded U.S. Sports gambling company make sense?
I think it's going to appeal to a lot of people, who are into sports betting, and it actually has been a big business, and this is sort of a high quality name. So I can see this being a name a lot of people can relate to. But valuation, I don't know the valuation, so I can't really say if it's going to be a great equity.
Stephanie, I think what's kind of fascinating about this is the fact that it's once again an example of a SPAC, a special acquisition company, and then you're basically seeing this three-way merger that's going to kind of through the back door take this company public. Do you think, we've been talking so much about direct listings, but do you think we're going to see more of this type of structure continue to be used?
It could be, but SPACs typically are not that liquid. This one happens to be a little bit more liquid because it's a $3.3 billion market cap, right? But that's actually the thing that impressed me, that and along with Capri and Wellington backing them. You've got some big-time players that are backing this entity. So I think this one might be a bit more unique, and it might, as a result, be pretty successful and more liquid for sure, more interest from investors.
The ownership structure for both has been through multiple chapters
Yes.
in recent years. Finally, Elon Musk tweeting that his stock is, quote, so high after Tesla hit a record in today's trading and finally hit $420 a share, more than a year after his notorious August of 18 funding secured tweet when he wrote that he planned to take Tesla private at that level, comes after Tesla reportedly landed this $1.4 billion loan from Chinese banks to build out its Shanghai Gigafactory. One thing people have been noticing, Steph, is the disparity between the equity and the debt, and whether or not that means anything going into year-end.
And apparently it doesn't at these levels. But the news, this is really big news to secure financing over in China. This actually gives more credibility to the growth story and the total addressable market story. I just can't play it because I can't get my hands around the valuation. It's never been a valuation, though. It's been a cult stock. You either believe in it or you don't. I'll miss this one, unfortunately.
Yeah, and Tom, there's the debt financing secured where China is concerned, but then you also have the reports that it has picked a site or it's settled on a site for another gigafactory in Germany. Is this a situation where this company is going more global and thus going to continue to disrupt the auto manufacturing sector?
Tesla has defied all the skeptics. It's been one of our granny shots. It's fit a lot of our themes that we think is appropriate for our clients. And I think it's really showing that, Tesla's kind of, we've reached that tipping point where electrification is a big deal and it's going to transcend, just, an auto purchase cycle. And I think Tesla's really infecting people's lives. So, I think it's good news, but it's really impressive, the performance this year.
What makes it a granny shot, Tom, given the leverage?
So valuation obviously is, as Stephanie pointed out, a little tougher to understand. But as you know, a lot of the big stocks over the past decade really had problems with valuations in the beginning. But it's they're a big play on automation and AI. They're a millennial play. I think millennials really relate to Tesla's brand much more than they do to traditional automaker brands, and they're a huge luxury seller. And it also fits asset heavy. Tesla is a really asset heavy company. If inflationary conditions pick up, companies like Tesla actually generate better earnings growth over the next decade because, their liability structure improves, but they benefit from the asset turns.
Interesting. That's a key point right there. We've got less than 4 minutes left to go here. The Dow's up 98 points, so slipping slightly. Shares of Aurora Cannabis, though, sinking in today's session. And Frank Holland is at HQ with more. Frank.
Hey there, Morgan. Aurora Cannabis down just about 10% after the face of the company, Chief Corporate Officer Cam Batley, resigned over the weekend. Aurora also today detailing its plans for the second year of legal recreational cannabis in Canada, saying it's shipped vaping, edible, and drinkable products to regulators that are expected to be available to consumers by January. Cannabis stocks overall expected to get a big boost from licensing changes in Ontario, the biggest province in Canada, that could lead to 1,000 store openings in 2020. Jefferies also downgrading the stock that's lost 58% of its value year to date. Back over to you.
All right. Thanks, Frank. I mean, it's hard to look at now, at some point, Steph.
I can't believe somebody had to buy on this thing all the way down. But no, the competition has been fierce. The adoption, obviously, very disappointing. And this was truly a bubble a year ago, right? This really was. So it's bursting, and this is what happens when you see this kind of thing happen.
Yeah, Tom, I mean, is it fair to say that what we've seen happen in cannabis stocks in the past year is kind of similar to what we saw happen with Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies the year before?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the charts look similar. I mean, I think cannabis kind of reminds me of some of the early internet business models, which was profitless prosperity. You know, there might be growing demand, but until someone can really capture value properly, it's going to be tough to be, creating something that generates sustainable return on equity.
That's quite a chart. Just under 2 minutes left to go. Let's get to Rick Santelli for a check on bonds. Hey, Rick.
Hey, good afternoon, Carl. Intraday of 10s. We're basically unchanged at 192, but for a while, looked like we were going to test 195 again, got close to 194 and failed. As you see on this one-week chart, it's happened several times. Also a bit of a curve flattening day with 2-year note yields up 2 basis points. Finally, all the talk about corporate bonds this year, having a wild year. Look at a year-to-date of the Barclays investment-grade corporate bond index. It's narrowed. It's now under 100, the tightest it's been all year. And Bertha, second session in a row, we've stacked right on top and didn't intersect. Really aggressive, big NASDAQ again.
NASDAQ up for the 9th straight session. It's the 29th record close of the year, and Apple a big reason why, on pace for its best year since 2009, the recovery from the financial crisis, and chips have followed right along with. What a difference a year makes. We're not so worried about tariffs anymore. Take a look at AMD. That slumped 14.5% over 4 perilous sessions going into Christmas last year. This year, it's at a new all-time high, and IPOs riding right along with 10x Genomics and Bridge Bio among the best performers in biotech. Over to Bob.
6-point trading range on the day. Still a new high, though, eking out just very, very narrow gains. Good day for energy, though. Look at Apache climbing more than 9% after the company entered into a joint venture with Total to develop projects off the Suriname coast. Other exploration and production stocks like Devon also up. Big month for all these. Some of them up 20% or more. Oil close to $61. There's the closing bell again near the lows for the session. S&P just up 2 points.
Closing bell. I'm Carl Quintanilla in for Wilfred Frost.
And I'm Morgan Brennan in for Sarah Eisen. Here is how we finish the day on Wall Street. Fresh record closes for all 3 of the major averages, with the Dow finishing the day up 96 points. The S&P also finishing up just barely, but finishing up higher, and the NASDAQ also higher. It's 9th straight day of gains, which is actually the longest win streak for the NASDAQ since fall of 2017. The Russell also finishing the day in the green. Joining us to talk about the market day, Stephanie Link, head of Global Equities Research at Nuveen, and Tom Lee, head of research at Fundstrat Global Advisors, both still with us. Stephanie, I'll start with you. What a difference a year makes as we come into Christmas Eve.
Thanks for the Fed. Thanks for global stimulus, fiscal and monetary policy. I mean, it really does. The combination clearly works. But this year was all about multiple expansion, guys. This was not about earnings, right? You went from 13.9 times on the forward S&P 500 multiple last December. You're now at about 18 times forward. We are getting rich. What we really need to see in 2020 is earnings growth. I think you're going to get it. I don't think you're going to get it that much in the first quarter, but I do think you're going to get it in the second half of the year. And that's what's going to be the driver, and what's going to drive that is really the global growth story.
Tom, you said this year was largely about reversing policy errors over at the Fed, and that next year would be about, in your words, animal spirits. By that, do you mean what Stephanie's getting to, and that is earnings rebound, or are we relying on PE expansion once again?
It's exactly what Stephanie said. I think when I talk about animal spirits, I think it's really confidence of not only businesses, so CapEx spending I think has upside next year, but it's the recovery in the PMIs that's actually going to deliver, I think, upside to earnings. I think the street's looking for mid to high single digits. I think next year's earnings could be up more than 10%. And so if Stephanie's right and we don't have any P expansion, you still have a double-digit year for stocks.
Wow. I would take 10%. I was just thinking maybe 5% or so, but I'd take 10% for sure.
Well, historically, single-digit years after a big year are not that common, right?
And then think about it. There are sectors that are trading at a lot lower multiples than other sectors, right? Technology and the FANG stock, they're kind of rich, right? But guess what? Energy's not. They're not expensive if you're going to see a recovery globally. Industrials still have lagged some of the other more exciting places in the market. So there are pockets of where you can actually invest and feel comfortable about on the valuation front, in my mind. And if you get earnings growth on top of it, that's icing on the cake.
Well, the new highs are definitely attracting bulls back into the market. According to a new report out of B of A, more than $16 billion flowed into U.S. equities just in the past week. That is a 3-month high. Comes as investor sentiment climbed to its highest reading since 2018. Tom, I'm not sure how you feel about this, given that flows and sentiment were something that the bulls used for their wall of worry all year long.
Yeah. Well, I think people withdrew the most money in 2019 and was almost a record outflow for individual investors. So to see some of it come back in is actually good. Merrill Lynch has another great survey where they look at future expectations by institutional investors, and that actually flipped positive, but it's the type of flip that you saw only in 02, 09, and 98. So that sort of flip from really negative to positive tends to have a lot of follow through in it. So I think it's going to really help 2020.
Stephanie, it's really fascinating because we've seen so many asset classes rally and log gains this year. But the fact that you've seen it happen within equities and happen within treasuries as well, how unusual is that? Would you expect it to continue?
I think it's very unusual, and I don't think it's going to continue. But then again, I would have said sell bonds a year ago, right? And maybe buying stocks at this point is not kind of the easy thing to do like it was last year. It was hard to buy in December of last year, but it was the right thing to do, right? Because you knew things were so depressed. Right now, we're a little bit more elevated, but I think you're more at risk in the bonds than you are in stocks. Again, because Tom and I are talking about global growth starting to pick up.
So, Tom, looking at your 2020 investment themes right now, where specifically should investors be positioning themselves?
Well, I think one thing that people can sort of, connect with what Stephanie was just talking about is there's a lot of earnings reversals taking place. Industrials, tech, energy materials had negative earnings growth this year. As that turns positive, that's an important dynamic because those four groups are going to account for almost half of the earnings growth next year. So some of the things that we like are, you want to overweight industrials, tech, financials, energy materials because there's a big earnings upside. But I think a theme that's going to gain a lot of traction next year is millennials. Millennials are already having an impact on housing. They're helping stocks like Tesla. They may get involved with stocks like DraftKings. And so I think as we think about the next decade, it's really about millennial spending habits, what they like and what they're going to do. They're going to inherit $68 trillion. I think it's a really good thing to follow what they do.
One thing we're hearing, guys, from some macro desks is that it might be a good year globally, U.S., but that it's going to be a better year in EM. It's going to be a better year in Japan, in Europe, that relative to U.S., the bargains just aren't there. What's wrong with that argument?
No, I totally agree with that argument, especially at the valuations of where we are. EM is at 12 times forward. Europe is at 15 times, and you could probably make a case that you could see some margin expansion. I feel like I always say that about European companies, and we never really see it. But I do think you can actually see a little bit of a boost. And this is all driven by what we talked about earlier, China. If China can stabilize and they continue to stimulate, and they're very accommodative on their monetary policy as well, and we don't have this trade tension, then that's going to be the driver, and then that's why you are going to want to have exposure. And then this goes back to why Tom and I like industrials, because it has that. And Morgan.
Tom, I remember when one of your key arguments was that global managers would want to own U.S. Isn't that story get a little reversed in 2020?
I think if we were to look at a 12-month window and people feel value is a place they want to get more exposure, it makes a lot of sense. EM's 63% value, Europe is over 50%, US is less than 36%. So if value is going to do well, that's why that could be the year for EM in Europe. But in the next 10 years, I think population growth and tech exposure really will make U.S. stand out from the rest of the world. I think the surprise next decade is the U.S. stock market could go to a 30 PE, and the rest of the world could still be stuck at a 10 PE.
Yeah, Tom's been pushing the U.S. demographic story.
Yes.
Which some are used as a negative, but Tom's using as a positive.
Oh, I think it is absolutely a positive. It's a huge tailwind, and I think you do want to pay attention to what the millennials are doing, but not just the millennials, Gen Z, because that is a totally different generation than the millennials, right? So there's going to be these puts and takes to various different generations, but I definitely think you want to be there.
It's amazing, though. We're having this whole conversation, and Tom, I'll put this question to you. We're having this whole conversation. We've got a big presidential election next year. How does that affect all of this?
Well, it's going to keep it exciting for sure because, there's very different policies depending on who wins. And I think, of course, the election cycle means that the primaries in the first part, and that's going to obviously be something that keeps everyone on edge. Ultimately, I think it's going to be buying opportunities, but, it's going to be interesting.
It can't all be perfect, guys. Come on.
Why not?
Because we need a wall of worry. You know that. And I've said it. When we don't have a wall of worry, then I worry.
That's right. Good discussion, Stephanie. Tom, enjoy vacation. We'll see you soon.
Yeah, have a great holiday.
When we come back, we'll talk more about the crisis at Boeing with New York Times reporter David Gellis. Wrote a critical piece about Muhlenberg over the weekend. We'll get his reaction to today's news when Closing Bell returns in 90 seconds.
Season to be hunched over your laptop. Not on our watch. In real life, you can feel your senses and your baskets. Feel all the sights, sounds, lols, and OMGs. Wear laughing emojis on actual smiley faces. Battery is running low. Take the kids to Santa's Grotto. In real life, you can find just the right present using the most advanced search engine in the world. Your eyes. We can't in real life. Brent Cross, London. Free parking for all sleighs and cars.
Want TuneIn to remind you when the big NFL game is about to get underway? Be sure notifications are allowed on your phone and search NFL on the TuneIn app. Find the game you want to hear under events and tap Notify Me. We'll let you know exactly when it's time to listen in for kickoff.
Whether you call yourself a Democrat, Republican, Independent, or something else, the road to 2020 is on TuneIn.
What a night! And a complete earthquake. This was
Follow every step of the Democratic primaries while hearing the latest headlines from the White House with live 24-hour news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox News Talk, and more.
We're closing in on the first results in the battle for the White House.
Experience the election through the sources you trust with the nonstop news channels on TuneIn.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slams it down. Get your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back, deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
Right now, instead of hearing this, you could be listening to the music that keeps you moving with TuneIn Premium. Find today's biggest songs and all of your favorites commercial-free. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Has there ever been a day where you're sitting around going, you know what, this is not working. It's not working. I got to get out of here. It's better for the company for me to leave.
Andrew, I think it's fair to say I've thought about it. But to be frank, that's not what's in my character. I don't see running away from a challenge, resigning as the right solution.
Former Boeing CEO Dennis Muhlenberg at the New York Times Deal Book Conference back in November. We now know Muhlenberg is out. Chairman David Calhoun will take over effective January 13. David Gellis joins us from the New York Times. He wrote a story over the weekend titled, "At Boeing, CEO Stumbles Deep in a Crisis." And Scott Brenner, former Associate Administrator at the FAA. Gentlemen, it's good to see you both. Thanks for being with us today. David, quite a piece. It's such a riveting look at the various constituencies that Muhlenberg repeatedly disappointed. I wondered, as you were reporting it over the weekend or before, if you knew that this event today was going to come.
No, we didn't know it, but listen, you said it. Just about every key stakeholder has been frustrated with Dennis's performance. The FAA has routinely felt like he was front-running them, trying to ask them to certify this plane before they were ready. Lawmakers felt like he was evasive in his congressional testimony. Customers were deeply frustrated with Gary Kelly, the CEO of Southwest Airlines, telling us that his performance had wreaked havoc on the ability of the company to schedule its flights. And the victims' families said that his name brought tears to their eyes. So there was simply no way that the board, after this cascade of setbacks, I think could stand by and let him continue to run the company.
Scott, a lot has been made of the corporate culture at Boeing, and certainly in part from David's own reporting as well. How does that need to change? Does it need to change? And is that basically how we got into the position we're in today?
I think it does. I mean, you have Boeing, which is a very reputable company producing great products, and they get caught in a situation where they don't have absolute control anymore. And normally they push the data, and the data they believe should answer any questions. And here we have a situation where the data is not answering all the questions. They are having problems with the FAA, I understand, where they are being more, I don't want to use the word arrogant, but they're not being as cooperative as they probably should be. And so maybe getting an engineer out of that top spot may buy them a little bit of time, but they really do need to change a lot of things that they're doing over there at Boeing.
David,
and this is a situation.
Go ahead.
I was just going to. This is a situation where data wasn't going to get them out of this, and that has been the key. You know, Dennis was an engineer. He was trying to do this essentially by an engineer's playbook, and he kept trying to be optimistic. And time and again, he got out ahead of himself and wound up promising things that he simply couldn't deliver. And instead, he needed to be working to repair relations with his regulator, to calm the nerves and be transparent with customers, and none of that was happening.
I was about to say, David, Reuters has some news today regarding a statement from the company on his severance, which they say could approach $39 million per some earlier filings. He's, I guess he's he's eligible for some outplacement services money. I mean, the heat is not over, whether on Wollenberg or the board, for why they were so overconfident.
As for his compensation, the company just told me before I came on the air that they are not making any announcements on that. And I understand, according to my sources, that they're still, frankly, trying to figure out exactly what his package is going to be. So we just have to stay tuned on that. On the new management team, it bears discussing. We have Greg Smith, the CFO, in as the interim for a period of about 3 weeks, and then Dave Calhoun, a longtime executive, who was named chairman of the Boeing company in October, taking over as full-time CEO on January 13. But already, people are not exactly happy with that. Dave was among those who has supported Dennis for the past many months. Even as recently as last Friday, the Boeing company said Dave Calhoun was standing by his statements made earlier that he and the board supported Dennis's performance. And I just spoke with Senator Richard Blumenthal, and I think this is already up in our story. He says that Dave is not, the fix. Dave was part of this culture, and he, in fact, in his interview with me, called on Dave to come testify as soon as possible, because he believes that Dave is simply representative of the same culture that got us to where we are today.
Scott, how do you think this plays out, especially in light of those comments right there? I mean, we've already had guests on our air today who pushed back and made the argument that the entire board needs to be looked at, scrutinized, and revamped right now.
Well, Boeing obviously has a public relations crisis that they need to address, but they really need to focus on fixing the issue and getting this plane back in the air. FAA is clearly going to take its time, make sure they get everything done as appropriate. I know the FAA administrator sent a message around to all FAA personnel recently saying, get this job done right. Don't feel you need to be rushed in any way. In the meantime, Boeing is, having issues with their customers, making big payouts to JetBlue and Southwest because their airplanes are grounded, dealing with a Congress that is going to try and rewrite all of the way products are certified. So Boeing has a lot on its hands right now, but they really need to focus on solving this problem and getting this airplane back up in the air.
David, what's the next big milestone you're looking for? I wonder if you think January brings constructive news about return to service, or is it going to be more about the impact, say, to earnings or cash flow in ways that we don't yet understand?
Well, we can't overstate what a profound juncture Boeing is at right now. For all year, Dennis Muhlenberg said that the MAX would essentially, the approval process, the recertification process, would be happening this year. We now know, of course, as of last week, that that's not true. Steve Dixon, the FAA administrator saying this plane will not fly again until 2020. And then Boeing taking this enormously consequential decision to shut down the 737 MAX factory. Now, that decision alone signals that Boeing doesn't know when this plane is going to be back in the air. They can't keep piling up these aircraft, and they need to stop production of their most important product for months until they can get this sorted out. As for milestones, the FAA said it again today. There is no timetable they are working with. So as for next steps, yeah, we got earnings coming up, and Boeing's inevitably going to take another multi-billion-dollar hit. We already know they've begun the process of compensating airlines, including Southwest. That's going to be big checks they are writing. But listen, they need to start the proper process of recertifying the plane. That involves more paperwork that they have not yet delivered to the FAA. It involves, the final readout from several tests that were conducted where there were complications in recent weeks. And then the FAA has to go through their rather slow motions of doing the certification test flight and making sure all the ducks in a row. And so we already know that United, for example, has pushed flights into June.
Yeah. Certainly not out of the woods by any stretch. A conversation, a topic we're going to continue to talk about. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us today.
Great, thank you.
Up next, the countdown is on. Christmas Eve is just hours away, and the last-minute shopping rush is in full swing. Which retailers are best positioned for that shopping surge? We're going to discuss that next.
Later on, will there be a video game console under your tree? Turns out, maybe not. We're going to explain why.
My TV and boom. TuneIn is remembering the biggest college sports moments of the decade, like this one from 2018, when Texas kicker Cameron Dicker nails the game-winning field goal in the Red River Showdown against Oklahoma.
A 40-yard field goal try. Good snap and hold. The kick on its way, and the kick is good! It's good! Dicker, the kicker, comes through, and with 9 seconds.
Search college sports on TuneIn to be there for the moments that go down in history. Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? We got you covered. With TuneIn Premium, you can listen to every NFL game live as it's happening.
LaShawn McCoy has an opening on the right side, punches into the end zone for the touchdown.
Or catch it later on demand.
Offset backs behind Mahomes. The give is to Williams. Starts right, cuts it back to the left, and blows into the end zone for the touchdown.
You call the plays. Follow the NFL anytime, anywhere, all season long with TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today. Ho, ho, ho! Make my job easier this year with a subscription to TuneIn Premium, featuring the world's largest selection of music, news, podcasts, and sports. It's a gift they'll enjoy every day, all year long. Ho, ho, ho! Happy holidays! Search Premium to upgrade today.
As we play out the 2010s, TuneIn's looking back at the music trends that defined the decade.
Don't believe me, just watch.
The 2010s saw the rise of the viral hit when meme-ready tracks like Gangnam Style,
Oppan Gangnam Style,
The Harlem Shake, What Does the Fox Say?
What does the fox say?
And of course, Old Town Road snowballed from internet oddities to global phenomenons.
I got the horses in the bag. Horse stock is a tag.
Keep listening to TuneIn for more trends of the 2010s.
Spend Christmas Day listening to the NBA on TuneIn Premium. Featuring 5 big matchups on the holiday schedule. Unwrap the action starting at 12 Eastern when the Celtics take on the Raptors in Toronto, followed by the Bucks and the 76ers at 2:30. The holiday cheers continue with the Rockets and Warriors at 5 and the Clippers and Lakers at 8. And a showdown between the Pelicans and Nuggets at 10:30. 'Tis the season with the NBA on TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today.
Welcome back to Closing Bell. We're in the final stretch for holiday shopping, and for all of you procrastinators out there, today is the final day for Amazon Prime's free one-day shipping. Our next guest says holiday sales will see 4% growth compared to last year. But this does come as more than 9,300 retail locations close their doors, with bankruptcies the driving force. Here to break down the retail sector and what we can expect in 2020 is Dana Telsey, CEO of Telsey Advisory Group. at Post 9. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Did you get all your holiday shopping done?
For the most part, but I tell you this, the one-day shopping to me is really fascinating, whether it's Amazon or whether it's Walmart, because it seems to me this holiday season is really the first major test case to see how it changes consumer behavior in these last final days and hours of shopping. How are you watching it?
I think it is changing shopper behavior. I think people can procrastinate longer. I think they looked earlier. When you look at the discounts this past weekend on Black Friday, it was greater on Black Friday. There was still a lot of discounts this weekend, but on average, the discount rate was higher Black Friday weekend than Saturday.
So who's winning the holiday wars, I guess, right now?
I think it's about value and convenience is what matters most. When you think about Target and Walmart, the off-pricers, it's almost off the malls a little bit winning more than on the mall. If you're on the mall, are you offering something different? Is it the Lululemons out there? Is it the luxury goods players that are out there? Everyone has their chance, but you got to innovate in order to win.
When does retail traffic become an important metric again? It's all red, right? 2-year stack, 1-year stack. There's going to be a point where it's going to flatten out, won't it?
We haven't seen that yet because we've seen traffic, and it depends where you are, be down around 3 to 4% every year. But what the real difference is the A malls versus everyone else. The halo effect of having digital and physical is there. On average, when you open a new store, your online sales can go up 20% plus. When you close a store, your online sales can go down pretty much by 50% or more.
Do you think 2020 will be saying goodbye to some legacy names in Chapter 11 or worse?
I think we're seeing some more closures in 2020. I think some of the names that where you've had partial closures in 19, you'll see more in 2020. We haven't had the big box closures come yet, and we could see some more of those as we get to 21 and beyond.
I gotta get your thoughts on TJX. The stock ended the day pretty much unchanged, and that was despite Senator Schumer saying that he wants a federal probe of TJ Maxx, Marshalls, and Home Goods stores over sales of deadly products. Basically, the company continuing to sell products that had been recalled. Why don't you think it dented the stock more, and how big of a risk is it for investors given the fact that this has been a name that's ripped higher this year?
I think you have a lot of companies that are large public companies where on average there's things that happen. I think they take heed to those items. I think they address them. And I think consumers wouldn't be going everywhere if there was safety issues and huge concerns. TJX is a company of scale, and I think when you call them the end of this week or next week, it'll be addressed.
All right. Well, Dana Telsey, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Happy
these
holidays.
Final hours of shopping.
Still ahead, rolling the dice. Fantasy sports company DraftKings set to become a public company, but it's foregoing the typical IPO process. We'll dig in on those details when Closing Bell returns.
Want TuneIn to remind you when the big NFL game is about to get underway? Be sure notifications are allowed on your phone and search NFL on the TuneIn app. Find the game you want to hear under events and tap Notify Me. We'll let you know exactly when it's time to listen in for kickoff.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
You might already know that TuneIn allows you to listen to all the pro sports leagues wherever you go. But did you know TuneIn is also home to the wide world of college sports?
Open three, DeAndre Hunter got it! Handoff Carruthers, big hole right side. He leaps and he surges in, touchdown!
From live college football, basketball, and baseball games to podcasts and coaches shows fueling your love for the game in your school. And the best part is, it's all free. Search college sports to find your team or league.
With 2020 on the horizon, TuneIn continues looking back at the stories that shaped the 2010s.
In 2010, the passing of the Affordable Care Act brings Obamacare to millions of uninsured Americans. In 2015, a ruling by Supreme Court legalizes same-sex marriage across the country. And in 2018, millions of students skip school to protest for stronger gun control in the March for Our Lives.
Search news on TuneIn to be listening when the next decade's big headlines break.
Hi, I'm Tom Haberstroh, host of the Haberstroh podcast. I'm partnering with TuneIn to answer a few questions and get you prepped for NBA Christmas Day. My favorite NBA Christmas memory is, I got to go with 2010 Heat Lakers. First year of the LeBron in Miami, going to the Staples Center against Kobe and the defending champion Lakers. Everything said the Lakers were going to win that game, but LeBron had a triple-double and blew blew out the Lakers. Search The Haber Show to listen to new episodes every Friday throughout the NBA season on TuneIn.
Along the goal line, scores! He takes it home!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
Here's Pietrangelo, he scores!
And you can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium.
Gonna move, hit a shot, he scores!
From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
Here's a look at the closing bell big board. On the top, all three major averages closing at record highs today. In the middle, the best performing sectors today, energy, industrials, materials. And then on the bottom, the worst sectors of the day, utilities, comm services, and consumer staples.
Well, it's time now for a CNBC News Update with Bill Griffith. Bill.
Morgan, here's what's happening at this hour. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo tweeted a photo of him giving the oath of office to the new U.S. ambassador to Russia, John Sullivan. Mr. Sullivan was the person who told former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, Marie Yovanovitch, that President Trump had lost confidence in her. Sullivan replaces John Huntsman, who stepped down from that post in August to run for governor of Utah next year. Thousands of civilians have fled the town of Murat al-Numan in northern Syria following continuous bombardment and air raids over the past week by Syrian forces. The city sits on a key highway linking Damascus with the northern city of Aleppo. And down under, firefighters continue to fight those massive wildfires in Australia. Around 200 of them are burning in 4 states, with New South Wales alone accounting for more than half.
We shouldn't underestimate just how much of the natural environment has been burnt, and that's got serious ecological impacts as well as the fire impact as well, and I think that'll be felt for years to come.
Not good. That is the CNBC News Update this hour. Back to you guys.
All right, Phil. Bill, thank you very much. Got a news alert on Boeing this afternoon. Phil LeBeau has some details on this. Phil?
Carl, this has to do with Boeing suspending 737 MAX production. That'll happen in January. Well, today the company is out telling all of the suppliers who supply to the 737 line, stop your shipments of parts in mid-January for 1 month. Now, the reason they're doing this now is that those suppliers can now look at their own order books, their own production logs at their facilities and say, okay, how do we manage this? If we're not going to ship to Boeing for a month, do we have to do some adjustments of our own, whether it's with manpower or shifts, etc.? So again, Boeing telling their suppliers, stop shipments on the 737 MAX for 1 month starting in mid-January. Guys, this is fluid. This could always adjust again over the next couple of weeks, but that's their indication at this point to their suppliers.
I get that this is fluid, Phil, but the fact that they're saying stop shipments for a month is the implication here, at least right now, or the assumption that that's going to be how long this halt is in place?
No, I think that it's more an indication, Morgan, that at some point within that 1 month time frame, they'll have better clarity, both in terms of whether or not the MAX is going to be recertified and when they might be able to fire up the assembly lines again.
Got it. Phil LeBeau, thank you.
You bet.
As we said earlier, DraftKings announcing plans to go public in a merger with a special purpose acquisition company, Diamond Eagle, and gaming technology companies SB Tech, expected to close in the first half of next year. The deal makes DraftKings the only vertically integrated pure play sports betting and online gaming company in the U.S. DraftKings CEO Jason Robbins was on Squawk this morning following the announcement, explaining why he thinks now is the time to raise some capital.
There's a lot of new states that have recently legalized online sports betting. Michigan just recently, Colorado about a month or so before. So we have a lot of really exciting, new markets that we would like to launch, and that requires capital investments.
David Katz from Jefferies is here on set talking more about this story. David, good to have you in. Is now the time to start monetizing the promise of what we know about at least fantasy or sports betting?
Look, I think what the reason we're seeing what we're seeing, as you point out, is that the story of U.S. sports betting is here in the U.S., but there hasn't been any pure play stock to buy. We just hosted, Jefferies did, with our U.K. colleagues and clients, a bus trip 3 weeks ago around New Jersey, came back with a great set of information. Investors were like, that's great, but what can I buy? And I think that's what we're seeing here today.
How big is the opportunity in the U.S. for sports gambling?
It's a terrific debate. that will go on for a while. Our estimate is $13 billion. I think the estimates in the information provided this morning began at 14 and went up to 23. And so that debate goes on and on. I think the pivotal matters are whether or not there is mobile. And one of the other pivotal matters that we don't know about, many states is whether in-person registration is required for online wagering. Mississippi has no mobile. Illinois passed, does have mobile, but it does require in-person sign-up in order for that to occur. All of those are going to affect how big the revenue opportunity ultimately is.
I think back to a couple years ago when I was in Atlantic City covering all the casino closures. And part of the reason we got to this point where you're seeing now the states passing legalization of sports betting is because New Jersey was looking to it as an opportunity to basically turn around and save its gambling business. What does this do to the casinos? And how much of a case study is New Jersey for the rest of the country?
Look, I think one of the critical elements that all of the states are looking at, to your point, Morgan, is that they rely on the tax revenue generated by those casinos, whether it's New Jersey or anywhere else. And so the licenses are being funneled or filtered through the casinos. And so they are driving that process. Now, the fact of the matter is, FanDuel is, doing quite well in New Jersey through their partnership. And there's such a small percentage of the revenue that's actually retail. And so when we go to the casino operators and those management teams and say, these numbers look great, the promise sounds fantastic, what should I do to my model? The answer is nothing yet. So what they're making, they are spending on bringing new customers in. And so far, there's no measurable impact on GGR, on casino floor revenue.
I remember in the early days when this was starting to bubble, people pointed to online poker and a hard reversal of policy that burned a lot of investors. Are we past worrying about that?
Look, I think there's a wide range of opinions. We are not particularly, worried about that. What we believe to be the case is that mobile will be the driver of this revenue and profit opportunity. And more importantly, the in-game wagering opportunity is, potentially very large, and there's a range of opinions about that. For example, you're watching a game with, I have a text that's been going on for 5 years with my cousins and brother. I bet Pete Alonso's hitting this one into the parking lot, $20. Now we can go on an app and place that bet right in the middle of a game. That's not the case in Europe. That will be the opportunity here in the U.S., and you're going to start to see that next baseball season.
Live viewership has a lot invested in this as well. Yeah, that's going to be a big deal for media as well as gambling. David, thanks. Appreciate that very much.
Up next, if you're expecting a video game console this holiday season, you may be out of luck. We've got the reason why ahead.
Later on, the super rich are setting up for 2020 what millionaires are expecting from the economy and the stock market next year when Closing Bell comes back.
You might already know that TuneIn allows you to listen to all the pro sports leagues wherever you go. But did you know TuneIn is also home to the wide world of college sports?
Open three, DeAndre Hunter got it! Handoff Carruthers, big hole right side. He leaps and he surges in. Touchdown!
From live college football, basketball, and baseball games to podcasts and coaches shows fueling your love for the game in your school. And the best part is, it's all free. Search college sports to find your team or league.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
Upgrade to TuneIn Premium and get over 45 commercial-free music stations. You'll also get live commercial-free news, plus live play-by-play games from NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Whether you call yourself a Democrat, Republican, Independent, or something